All right, chapter 11 The Anglo Saxons. Before proceeding further, I wish to point out to the reader, and particularly to those students who are interested in the lost 10 tribes, that none of the Israelites we have spoken of so far went into Assyrian captivity. Many students have concerned themselves with the fate of the lost 10 tribes, which represented the kingdom of Israel, but few people have realized that at least 3 times as many Israelites left their homeland before the captivities began, either compelled by the increase in population or beginning with the 9th century for fear of the Assyrian power, which then was invading the land of the Hittites and Syria. Ever since the reign of Jeroboam, Israel had rejected Jehovah and worshiped Baal and the golden calf, and the retribution was not long in coming. Like all other nations that have defied God, Israel also had to pay for their folly, although they did not know the why and the wherefore of their punishment. Neither does Israel of today, Great Britain, and the United States realize the cause of their depression. Natural reactions have their cause in spiritual neglect. For every bad deed, there is a punishment, just as the depression of today had its source in the spiritual decay of our age. But our nation does not seem to grasp that yet. So also did natural enemies like Assyria arise to carry out the divine judgment upon a godless people. As early as the reign of Ahab and Jehu, kings of Israel, we read, "In those days the Lord began to cut Israel short, and Hazael smote them in the coasts of Israel from Jordan eastward, all the land of Gilead, the Gadites, and the Reubenites, and the Manassites from Aror, which is by the river Arnon, even Gilead and Bashan." 2 Kings 10:32 through 33. From these words we may take it that it was during this period, about 900 to 800 BC, that the disintegration of the kingdom of Israel, or the Beth Sak, commenced. Beth Sak is the Phoenician name for the house of Isaac. The prophet Amos also calls them by the same name in chapter 7, verse 16. Likewise, it is of great interest and importance to us that on the Amarna tablets, the Habaru, Habarai, or Abari, who conquered Palestine under Abdashara or Joshua, are also named the Saga or Sakamen. Refer to the oldest letters in the world by Bristow, page 32. Thus it appears that Israel was their biblical name only, while their heathen neighbors and enemies spoke of them as Habaru and Habari, and Saga or Sakai, sons of Sak or Isaac. That is one of the reasons why they were so easily lost to later historians. The real captivity of the Beth Sak began in 745 when Tiglath-Pileser came and took large portions of the tribes of Asher, Zebulun, Issachar, and Gad into Syria, and recorded in 2 Kings 15:29. Now, there are many people who believe that Israel should be looked for in the east, in the same place where they were lost. Those good people do not realize that it all depends upon whether the thing we lose has legs or not. If we have lost a knife or any other object, it is more than likely that the object is still where we dropped it. But if we have lost a dog, for instance, or a boy at a certain spot, the chances are that he will move away from there. And so it was with the lost tribes. They were a lively bunch, always gadding about and venturesome, ever pushing forwards towards the setting sun like all the Hebrew Phoenicians. The empire of Assyria was at the height of its power at the time it invaded Palestine, but rapidly declined after 185,000 of its soldiers perished in the siege of Jerusalem, as recorded in 2 Kings 19:35, and with its ending the fortunes of the Sakgeloths, the prisoners of Isaac, naturally changed, for, according to prophecy, the eye of Jehovah was watching over them. "Behold, the eyes of the Lord God are upon the sinful kingdom, and I will destroy it from off the face of the earth, saving that I will not utterly destroy the house of Jacob, saith the Lord. For lo, I will command, and I will sift the house of Israel among all nations like like as corn is sifted in a sieve, yet shall not the least grain fall upon the earth. Amos 9:8-9. In 720 BC, Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, invaded Israel and laid siege to its capital, Samaria, which fell after 3 years in 717 BC to Sargon II, successor to Shalmaneser. The account of this siege is given in 2 Kings 17:5-6 and 18:11. And the king of Assyria did carry away Israel into Assyria and put them in Halah and in Habor by the river Gozan and in the cities of Medes. A record of this fall of Samaria was found written on the walls of the palace of Sargon II at Nineveh, which reads, "In the beginning of my reign I besieged, I took by the help of the god Shamash, the city of Samaria. 27,280 of its inhabitants I carried away. I took them to Assyria and put into places people whom my hands had conquered. I set my officers and governors over them and laid on them a tribute as on the Assyrians. It was the Assyrian custom to take the inhabitants of a country and exchange them with those of another conquered territory. According to the Bible record, the Sac-Galoths, or prisoners of Isaac, were taken to the river Gozan and into the cities of the Medes. Professor Hannay identifies the Gozan with the Uzan River that flows northward through the land of ancient Media into the Caspian Sea. The location of Israel's banishment was therefore 400 miles east of Nineveh and formed one of the outlying districts of the empire to which Israel was expected to pay tribute, but otherwise they were little molested. Professor Hannay believes that over 3 million Israelites were taken in all to Assyria, but this is probably exaggerated. We must also bear in mind that before Assyria could invade Israel, they had to go through and overcome the Hittite Empire, which came to an end 4 years after Samaria, after Karshemish was taken in 714 BC. As perhaps half of the population of the Hittites, the Katai, were Israelites, we can readily see that a large number of Israelites went into Assyrian captivity and into the land of the Medes south of the Caspian Sea. Living there semi-independently for the next 100 years, those Sacs or Sakai, as they appear on various Eastern inscriptions, like the Bishtan rock, became the predominating element in Media, just as their ancestors had been in Phoenicia. They, in fact, were the leaders in the Medic Wars of rebellion, first against Assyria and later against Babylon. For a period, it seems, the Sacs passed under the name of Manda, a title derived from one of their chieftains, and modern historians such as Professor Sayce believe now that it was one of those Manda or Sakai that Cyaxares was king. It was they who, under Cyaxares, joined with the Babylonians under Nabopolassar, marched against Nineveh in 606 BC and destroyed it after 2 years' siege, when the last czar of Assyria, Ashur-etililani, determined to perish in the flames of his capital and made a funeral pyre of his court. It was here that the people of Israel began to fulfill their divine destiny as God's battle axe, as we read in Jeremiah 51:20 and 21. Thou art my battle axe and weapons of war, for with thee will I break in pieces the nations, and with thee will I destroy kingdoms, and with thee will I break in pieces the horse and his rider, and with thee will I break in pieces the chariot and his rider. The power of Assyria had been the chosen medium to take Israel into captivity, but only a century later that power was destroyed by the sons of the prisoners that they took into captivity. After the fall of Ashur, the Sacs and Sakai became the dominant power in that region, and let it be noted at the very time that the kingdom of Judah ended in Palestine and went into Babylonian captivity, about that time a large host of the Sacs moved northward across the Araxes River and through the Caucasus Mountains into southern Russia, where they became known as the Scythians, the Latin term for the Greek word Scathai, for Sac-Galoth, meaning the prisoners of Sac. Some writers also speak of them as the Skolatoi. Before we follow the Saxon to Europe, let us devote a few pages to those of their brethren whom remained in Media. Professor Waddell, in his map of Eastern Asia, gives Western Media as the home of the Guti and Katai, which name we have seen is a derivation of Gadel or Gad, and therefore either men of Gad or Judah or both, as we have seen before. These Guti or Katai amalgamated with the Sacs, and together they formed the backbone of the growing power of Media. From a cylinder bearing the name of Cyrus, we learn that Gobryas, general of the Guti in the army of Cyrus, came against Babylon and took it in 536 BC. This was that memorial destruction of Babylon on the night of Belshazzar's feast, as told in the 5th chapter of Daniel. Here again, Israel played their predestined roles as God's battle axe. In the words of Jeremiah 51, 24 and 25, 28 to 29, and I will render unto Babylon and to all the inhabitants of Chaldea all their evil that they have done in Zion in your sight, saith the Lord. Behold, I am against thee, O destroying mountain, saith the Lord, which destroyest all the earth, and I will stretch out mine hand upon thee, and roll thee down from the rocks, and will make thee a burnt mountain. Prepare against her the nations which the kings of the Medes, the captains thereof, and all the rulers thereof, and all the land of his dominion. And the land shall tremble in sorrow, for every purpose of the land shall be performed against Babylon, to make the land of Babylon a desolation without an inhabitant. For many years, Orientalists, could find no trace of this Babylonian Belshazzar and discredited the story of Belshazzar's feast until Sir Henry Rawlinson found an inscription at Ur asserting that near the end of his reign, Nabonidus, the last king of Babylon, associated Belshazzar, his eldest son, with him on the throne. Daniel 5:31 states that Darius the Mede took Babylon. This Darius is also a mysterious figure, as Cyrus was king of Medo-Persia when Babylon was taken, the word Darius being merely a title meaning lord or governor. Cyrus was succeeded by Cambyses in 529 BC, and the latter was succeeded by Darius Hastapes in 521 BC. He was the king during whose reign the temple was rebuilt, is told in the 1st chapter of Haggai. Even the Schofield Bible questions who this Darius is who took Babylon and suggests that he is Gobryas. If he is, then he is as chief of the Guti was an Israelite. If he is, then he as chief of the Guti was an Israelite who, as general for Cyrus, ended the power of Babylon. It appears, however, that Cyrus himself was defeated and killed by the Sakai in 529 BC. Herodotus and Diodorus tell us that Cyrus was killed by the Massagetae under the Queen Tamris on the Jaxaturus Getae, which is the Medic form of Guti or Katai, and likewise means wanderers or adventurers, and indeed such they were, wandering over Eastern Asia for centuries and later into Europe. Massagetae means, according to Professor George Rawlinson, great wanderers, and it was they who defeated Cyrus the Great when he attempted to invade their territory on the Jaxartes River east of the Oxus. Herodotus is stating that the Massagetae lived on the Araxes is mistaken about the river's location and means the Jaxartes. Just as the history of Greece or Hellas begins with a mythical age, so also has the history of Persia its mythical meaning. The early Persian literature of the Zendavesta is full of traditions of an heroic age with noble deeds and old-time chivalry. Accurate Persian history dates back to Alexander the Great, but previous to the legendary history goes back to the heroes of the Asia or Angli and the Sakai in the mythical stories of the Zendavesta, all of whom our friends, the people of Israel, who, beginning about 700 BC, had spread themselves over the territory between the Caspian Sea, the Hindu Kush, and the Persian Gulf, and even as far north as the Jaxartes River, where they founded Samarkand, meaning New Samaria. This was the period of Zoroaster, or Zarathustra, who was undoubtedly a Katai or Israelite and who introduced the Baal fire worship of the later Katai from the Phoenician homeland into Irana, the Persia of latter days. Zoroaster taught the existence of one God, the creator of all things, to whom all things belong. Zoroaster's faith was a religion of righteousness, or Asha, from which is derived the word Asia. Like the Phoenicians, he and his followers worshiped God through his visible symbol, the sun, from which the Parsi religion developed, which still survives in India until today. The language of these Sakai of Zoroaster's time was the ancient Zend, in which the Avesta, the ancient lore, is written, as well as the Gathas, or sacred hymns. As the Sakai were Phoenicians, so also was their language, the Zend, a variation of it, which probably had survived in this district from the time that the earliest Aryans or Adamites came down from the mountains of the Hindu Kush 1800 years before. It was at this period, 700 to 600 BC, that the runic characters developed from the Phoenician script, which characters we find engraved in that region as far east as Lake Arel, where the Massagetae lived, and all across Russia to northern Germany, Scandinavia, England, and Iceland. In those runic characters, the sagas of the Sags and Goths were written, the Gathas of Zoroaster and the Eddas of the Norsemen, which again are derived from the earlier Vedas of the Indo-Aryans. All of the ancient sagas, though considered today only fictitious literature, contained the legendary lore of the heroes of ancient times who were the forefathers of the Goths and the Scythians, the Gatai or Guti of Turkland or Turkestan, and the Sacs of Sakland south of the Caucasus. There in that region, south of the Caspian Sea, was the cradle of the so-called Nordic races, and there also the cemetery of ancient Israel, where Israel disappeared from the pages of history. The Anglo-Saxons and the Goths were born. An investigation into the origin of the Buddhist religion will show that it originated about 500 BC in the mountains of northern India among all people called the Sakyas. The name of Buddha himself is associated with that of Sakya. It is an open question whether a man by the name of Buddha ever existed. Some even associate him with the Odin of the Goths or with Thoth. Scholars believe that Buddhism is a survival of the early sun cult of the Aryans, as the word Buddha is derived from the Sanskrit root Buddha, bud, to know or to awake. It expresses, therefore, the type of religion or philosophy that Buddhism is. What is of chief interest to us, however, is that the Sakyas of northern India, the people who were the originators of Buddhism, were a branch of our friends, the Sakai, Sags, or Asa of Arana, who had crossed into northern India. Is it Ariana? I think it's Ariana. Or Asa of Ariana, who had crossed into northern India. Our frontispiece shows a reproduction of a rock carving near the city of Bhopal in India, known as the Topaz of the Sakai, dating from the 4th century BC. Not only the name of Sakai, but also the picture itself is of great interest to us. I've got to mark that or I will forget where it's at. See, and then when I do that, I lose my place. Okay, Topaz of Sakai, dating from the 4th century, taken from the British History, traced by Roberts. Not only the name Sakai, but also the picture itself is of great interest to us. Below, we see a lion and a unicorn, which are the emblems of the whole house of Israel, the Lion of Judah, and the unicorn, the calf or eagle of the separated kingdom of Northern Ireland. Both figures are still on the British coat of arms. In the center, we see the shield of Britannia, or the Brits, or Covenant race, together with two tridents, the same as that held by Britannia on our plate 6. On one side hangs a double flag with the crosses of St. Andrew, and on the other a starry banner. Of all the ancient stone carvings, this is the most striking and of the greatest importance to us, for in it we can see that the original pattern for the Union Jack and the Star-Spangled Banner was in the minds of our ancestors 23 centuries ago, and probably before that, not only in Europe but in distant Asia. The Sakai again are mentioned on the Bestun Rock inscription, wherein Darius the Great boasts that he had taken some of them as prisoners about 500 BC. One of the Sakai, shown on the stone carving by the name of Sakanua, wears the typical conical cap of the Goths or Scyths, as Darius was at that period ruler of the whole Medo-Persian Empire, extending from the Mediterranean to the Indus. The Sacs were, of course, citizens of his empire and continued so until 2 centuries later, when Alexander the Great invaded Persia. It was the Sacs, or Gatai, and the Scuts who gave him more trouble than any of the other people he had encountered, and during his invasion, many of them left their eastern homes and trekked around the Caspian Sea to join their kinsmen, the European Scythians. After the Battle of Ipsus in 301 BC, the whole of Persia fell under the sway of Seleucus, and when his kingdom broke up 50 years later, there arose a new power, Parthia, whose very name, identical to Parthi, Prat, or Brat, indicates that its people were of the covenant race of Israel, the Sakai. Refer to Professor Waddell's explanation of the variant spellings of Brit, Brat, and Prat in Chapter 5. The Parthian revolt against the Greeks was headed by Arsaces, whose name, meaning the ruling Sac, again proves who the leading element of Parthia were. It must be explained here that not all of the people of Ariana in those days were Sakai. No, indeed, the main population of that country was Hamitic, and also Samaritans of Japhetic strain, and in the most eastern sections were even some Turarian or Mongolian people. But it was the Sacs who started what civilization that part of the world enjoyed, as they have likewise carried civilization to every other country. The Parthians were renowned as horsemen and archers. They were clad in mail, by which their steeds were also protected. Their military tactics were proverbial. For almost 3 centuries, the Parthian power extended its sway even into Syria, where they defeated a Roman army, but after 50 AD, their power declined for the good reason that the Sags, who had been the backbone of the nation, departed and followed their kinsmen into Europe. Since 600 BC, these wanderings of Israel into Europe had been in progress. After the fall of Nineveh in 606, the parent stock of the Sacs left their homes in Sackland and departed from Arsareth, taking the plunder of Nineveh with them. It is evidently this exodus that is spoken of in 2 Esdras 13:39-46. And whereas thou sawest that he gathered another peaceable multitude unto him, those are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Hosea, the king, whom Salmansar, the king of Assyria, led away captive, and he carried them over the waters, and so came they into another land. But they took his counsel among themselves, that they would leave the multitude of the heathen, and go into a further country where never mankind dwelt, that they might keep their statutes, which they never kept in their own land. And they entered into the Euphrates by the narrow passages of the river, for through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half in the same region is called Erisarath. Then dwelt they there till the latter time. And I got to pause there, and I hate interrupting books. I hate it. But if I don't get this thought that I got out or written down or something, I'm going to forget it. And I don't want to forget it because this reminds me of one of Jason's, it was a picture he put up and it had 3 arrows and it was showing, man, I'm not good at this, showing the Exodus. I'm going to find a picture and I'm going to put it up and I'll probably start it at the beginning of this. And I just wanted to say, I think it relates to what I'm reading right now. I'm not about to try to explain it. I don't know. Maybe this book is explaining it, but I think it goes with it. If it doesn't, you can always let me know. I'll take it down. I'll never do that again. But I'm going to do that. And I didn't want to forget that because I could have wrote it down, but then I would have fluffed up my readings. So I figured I'd just fluff up the whole reading the way like I just did and get it out this way. So anyways, starting from their homeland in Sakland between the present Tabriz and the Caspian, they crossed the Araxes River and through a pass in the Caucasus migrated into the steppes of southern Russia, moving westward along the shores of the Black Sea as far as the Carpathian Mountains. From these mountains flows a river named Sareth, mentioned by Esdras, R, meaning river. The Sareth, like the Pruth, is a tributary of the Danube. The name Pruth is another variant of the Prat or Barat name of Israel. There, in the present countries of Moldavia and Bessarabia, they came into conflict with the Cimmerians, an earlier flock of Israel mentioned in the previous chapter, whom they drove westward into the present Germany. As the name Sith or Scuth is derived from Sak or Galoth, it appears that it was they who gave Scythia its name. Pliny says, the Sakai were among the most distinguished people of Scythia, who settled in Armenia and were called Sakasani. Diodorus Siculus, the great historian of the time of Caesar, wrote of them, the Scythians, formerly an inconsiderable few, possessed a narrow strip on the Araxes, but by degrees they became powerful in numbers and in courage. A reading of the 4th book of Herodotus makes it clear that the people of Scythia were by no means of one and the same race. Some of them were agriculturalists and civilized, while others were Slavic and even Turanian, I can't say that word, Turanian nomads and savages. He says, for instance, the Sakai, who were Scuths, had on their heads caps, which came to a point and stood erect. They also wore loose trousers and carried bows, daggers, and battle axes. These Amagrian Scuths are called Sakai. The Scythians, I think that's it, told Herodotus that their nation had been in existence for 1,000 years previous to the invasion of Darius. If we date, therefore, 1,000 years backwards from the time of Darius, 515 BC, we arrive at 485 BC, the date of the Exodus when Israel was founded. This referred to what Herodotus called the royal Scythians, who considered the other tribes in the light of slaves. These lived on the Garas, a tributary of the present Dniester. Herodotus includes among the Scythian tribes the Getai, who lived on the shores of the Danube, i.e. the Arsacereth of Esdras. Getai, we have already seen, means merely wanderers, and such the Sakai were. Those Getai, as Herodotus tells us, believed in the immortality, going after their death to Zalmoxis, which means nothing less than the God of Moses. So also was the country where the Getai lived, named Moesia, for in it lived the people of Moses. Many Tamali have been found in southern Russia, some of whose interiors were built of white marble. In these were found chariots, pottery, jewelry, bracelets, gold, and precious stones of the finest workmanship and greatest abundance. The finest of those tumuli is that of Soloka in the Crimea, which served as a mausoleum for the Scythian kings for several centuries. This tomb contained magnificent furnishings of silver and gold. One of the royal skeletons found in it wore a heavy golden necklace with lion-headed ends. Couching lions are also very prominent on the exquisite repose work of solid gold adorning the walls and on the various gold and silver ornaments found, as well as on the handles and sheaths of the swords, which themselves were made of fine steel. The repose relief work pictured mostly battle and hunting scenes. On the repose relief work pictured mostly battle and hunting scenes. Wait a minute. The repose relief work pictured mostly battle and hunting scenes. On the repose relief work pictured mostly battle and hunting scenes, on which the warriors appeared in chainmail coats. It is also noteworthy that they are not bare-legged like the Greeks of that period were, but are wearing trousers. All the ornamental design is of most unusual excellence. Descriptions of this tomb, which dates of the 4th century BC, are found in the American Journal of Archaeology of 1914, volume 28, and in the Illustrated London News of January 3rd and February 14, 1914. Professor Hannay refers to the Hebrew manuscript found in one of those tumuli, which reads, I am Jehudi, the son of Moses, the son of Jehudi the mighty, a man of the tribe of Naphtali, which was carried captive with the other tribes of Israel by the prince Shalmaneser from Samaria during the reign of Hosea, king of Israel. They were carried to Halah, to Harbor, which is Kabul, to Gozan, and to the Chersonesus, which is in Crimea. This confirms the story of these wanderers of Scyths, the people of Israel who were taken. Wait a minute. Is that how far I want to go? Give me a second. Yeah, the people of Israel who were taken to the river Gozan, the identical story of that found in 2 Kings, but it also tells us of the later wanderings to the Crimea. I think I'm going to stop there because it's going to start getting into plates. This is a long chapter, so make sure this is where you stop. All right. So, yeah, this one might take me a 0.2 or 0.3. Hope you're having a good one.